Amen. A couple of weeks ago, I've been doing this kind of bird's eye perspective on the Bible for the last few weeks. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about wisdom literature. I swear I left it right here, but I forgot it. Do you remember when I talked about wisdom literature? I had a water bottle and a spray bottle, and it was ksh, right? What happens when you hit a spray bottle like that? You get the mist particles. And one of the keys of one of the books of the wisdom literature kind of details out the kind of human experience of how everything feels temporary. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Everything is mist in the wind. You're trying to find meaning in your life. You're trying to find something good in your life. You found something really great. It's just mist. You're reaching out for it. The Bible, the Hebrew wisdom literature, does a great job of reminding us not of holding life up to this unrealistic standard. Very real. Life is temporary and short. It can feel incredibly like, if you study Eastern faith traditions, Buddhism, attachment is suffering. And actually the practice of Buddhism is detaching, and that way decreasing suffering. As long as you're not striving after the mist, that is kind of spiritual awakeness. Nirvana, the height, when you finally are releasing of all attachments, the highest achievement is just that. You are done striving for the mist. Now, that's Hebrew Bible, and it's biblical wisdom. Jesus is within this tradition. Jesus continues this tradition and says, yes, there is the mist, but he offers something more in our current story. What we didn't get to read, what happens earlier in the book of John, is one of the biggest stories of the four Gospels. It's in all four Gospels. You know how little all four Gospels have in common? So if there's a story they have, Christmas only shows up in one, kinda in two. And we talk about Christmas every year. Right? The resurrection of Lazarus. Jesus raised a guy from the dead. That only shows up in one. The story of the feeding of the 5,000 happens in all four Gospels. They have a little different lessons in each one. And in this one, in the Gospel of John, the people are chasing after him. Jesus just fed the 5,000, and they're chasing after him. He goes on a boat. Well, his disciples go on the boat, and then he walks on water. A whole nother sermon all right there about feeding people and water. And then they get to the other side, which is kind of where the gospel thinks it's funny. The Gospel of John, so the crowds, they go and they meet Jesus, and they find him, and they're like, Jesus, how did you come to be here? And now you can get really heady, and most of the commentaries do. They're like, this is a reflection of Jesus as a Christ's nature, and the eternal God made flesh in the real. I think this is a joke written in the Gospels. So the followers, the people who were fed the 5,000, they are showing up and saying, Jesus, how did you get to this side of the pond? And the disciples are like, it wasn't in the boat. I bet you wish you knew. He walked on the water. Like that's me. That's your commentary according to Luke. But they say and Jesus has this back and forth with them. He's like, you're coming to find me, not for me. You're coming to find me so that you can get another free meal. And trust me, this feeling of when you are about service to the community, when you are providing as a religious organization, as a faith community, when you provide for others, that gut feeling sometimes that the crowds that you do manage to get are just coming to get another one is real. And it's something to talk through. Now, first and foremost, one of the things I do want to mention, speaking as somebody who's, I've only missed meals when I've tried to lose weight. There are people for whom their next meal is not guaranteed. plenty of people, and you never want to like kind of just gloss over this fact for some folks. So when Jesus is like, yeah, you're just looking for your next free meal. When your next meal isn't guaranteed, I don't want to shame somebody for that. And the thing is, at this time, the folks Jesus is talking to, including Jesus himself, the next meal isn't a for sure thing. Jesus isn't speaking out of this ivory tower to other people in ivory towers. He is on the ground. He is going from town to town, living off the generosity of others. And so are many of the people who are following him. So when Jesus says to them, stop chasing your next meal. Chase for the meal that endures forever. Chase for the things that last. I mean, it's not just some lofty goal. It's real. It's in comparison to the hunger they feel in their stomachs. And he makes this comparison to himself. He ends up saying, I am the bread of life. In him, his person. And he puts up believing in him as part of the way to receive this bread of life. It's a comparison to earlier, or is it later in John? Jesus has to deal with the woman at the well. Do you remember that story? There's a woman going to the well at noonday. Now, how many of you want to go outside when it's 90 degrees? At the heat of the day. If you know it's going to be over 90 degrees with 100% humidity between noon and 1, are you planning to do your outdoor chores? Probably outside of that time. Now this woman is going to get water at the heat of the day. And Jesus has a very similar dialogue with her. He says to her, you know, there's going to come a point where the living water, God will grant out living water and you'll never thirst again. Here's a woman who's like doing her labor in the worst conditions, and Jesus is saying, hey, you might not have to come to the well anymore. And her reaction is, give me this water immediately. It's a comparison. And when I put those two together, I'm going to be honest, I still don't know what he means. Give me this bread think of your greatest meal that you've ever had. Think of the best sandwich, the best meal, the most satisfying, the most satiating, the best feel. Mine happens at Spirit of Hope every Wednesday. It's the burger I cook myself. No, I'm kidding. But if I think about it, like I have on a Wednesday or two I usually wait till everybody's fed to see what's left. And there's usually plenty. There's not many Wednesdays where I don't have 2 hamburgers and a hot dog. Oh yeah. And some of y'all know how to make desserts. Oh yeah. I'll have 2 cookies because I'm cooking. I'm working off the calories, right? And then somebody makes this like cake with peanut butter and chocolate. Like it's made out of peanut butter and it's cake, and then there's this frosting and chocolate hunks on top. So I have 3 of them because I'm Trinitarian. And I have that, and I can skip breakfast the next day, but by lunch, I'm still hungry. And if anybody's been feeding off Jesus, who's living on Jesus, I'm trying my best, and I'm still eating food, and I'm like, what does Jesus mean? If Jesus is using this kind of doublespeak, the living water, if you drink it, you'll never be thirsty again. Do you know how much water I go through? The health agency starts saying a gallon a day is what you're supposed to go through. Try drinking that and keeping a job. That's just not going to work. So what could he mean? And some of it's tied into believe in me. Believe? Now, one thing I always want to make sure people know. There's a lot of Christians who try to put a monopoly on belief, and they will try to convince you that belief, well, not just Christians, religion, Most religions have a sense of that belief is all a cognitive exercise. That belief is a statement that you say yes to, whether or not there's evidence against it, whether or not there's evidence for it, such as cheeseburgers are better than hamburgers. I believe cheeseburgers are better than hamburgers. Whether or not you agree, but it fills me. That's not what Jesus is saying. Here is a statement that Jesus is God, and that should satisfy you. It's not the statement that Jesus is the Son of God that satisfies you. It's not this overarching cognitive, in my mind, do I agree with some kind of statement about Jesus that makes you feel like you can go through another day. Belief, according to Jesus, is more related to our word trust. It's trust in who Jesus is, what he has done, and what his teachings are, and what they reveal to be. Still feels a little, I don't know, Jesus and his teaching. If Jesus' teaching is central about God's gift to us, if Jesus is God's gift to us, God made flesh, God being real, then it has to be then our lives here have to have divine and holy meaning. I wasn't eavesdropping on a conversation recently, or dropping into eaves, depending on who you are. I wasn't eavesdropping, but I was hearing this conversation between a nurse who had been retired for actually I know precisely, 6 years. A nurse who had been retired for 6 years, and another nurse who had been working in nursing for about 10 years. Do that quick math about what experience has one had that the other one wouldn't over the last 6 years or 10 years. What has shaped each one? What was the experience? They were discussing some of the recent kind of burnout amongst nurses. The retired nurse says, with more compassion than what I might be able to project, because it's what I heard. I could only imagine what the nurse heard. The other nurse, the retired nurse, says, in my day, we just did the work. It was medicine that mattered. It was the care that mattered. It seems like all the nurses today are chasing after money, and they can't seem to keep their eyes on the prize, which is just medicine. Speaking not out of complete ignorance, this was a nurse with 35 years of experience. We had hard times. I had hard patients. You kept showing up for work. The young nurse, you could just see the firming up of her face getting really measured. Would you like to know? The older nurse looks at her and says, good luck. The younger nurse says, well, since COVID and over the last 10 years, medicine has become more political than you ever experienced. Medicine has become, we have far more administrative and precautionary tasks. More of my movements and actions are under scrutiny. And because of inflation, what seems to be what was a good income to start off with just isn't at start anymore. And it takes longer to get where you were comfortably. The older nurse put up her hands, said, sure. And both walked away, pretty infuriated at the other. I wasn't in this role as pastor. I was just there as Luke. And all I could think to myself was, I've heard that conversation happen amongst teachers, amongst clergy, amongst mechanics, amongst wait staff, amongst volunteers of nonprofit organizations, whether they be the Lions Club or my very own church. Burnout of folks who They are on the other side. They are filled with wisdom surrounding a topic, and they just can't their burnout is they can't handle any new information. And a young person, relatively, or new to the profession, somebody who should be filled with energy, vigor, and vision about change, just can't seem to get off the ground and is tired of the fight already. I don't know if you felt that. Maybe I'm preaching, maybe the rest of the sermon is just preaching to me. But this, for me, is exactly who comes to Jesus in the Gospel of John. Both of them. Whether it's the well-experienced, clearly retired. There's manna in the morning, manna in the noontime, manna every other day. Why aren't you just happy with the manna? Just keep going to Jesus and you're going to get your manna. And Jesus is looking at the elder experience going, it wasn't Moses who gave you the bread from heaven. And for the burned out startup, Jesus is going, you need something more than the bread you're getting every day. Look beyond just this current miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. Look for the bread that endures. Okay, Pastor, what do you mean? Let me ask you, of all the things Jesus teaches, of all the gifts and presence that he is, when I'm going to have intercessory prayer later where we're going to make petitions. That's like kind of the whole point, is for us to bring our concerns and our cares for the future of the time. You have names, situations, experiences that you want God's presence in for now. But I will challenge you, if you've ever been tired of what you're doing, if you are exhausted from your labor, if you just want some kind of release, if you feel like everything is missed, like it's just coming through your fingers, this is going to sound so incredibly simple, but start giving praise to God for the things you have right now. Gratitude for your specific circumstance. Now, I can stand up here and say that I'm great at this. I'm not. I'm okay. And it's okay to be forgetful sometimes. The number one thing to do is when you, this seems so simple, getting a gratitude journal, it doesn't even have to be all that official. It can be your notebook and in the margins. You write 3 things that you're grateful for, and I'm not saying I am thankful that the sun is out today. Get as specific as you can. When you narrow down, you think of something you're grateful for, get more specific about it. I'm grateful for my kids. More specific. I'm grateful that my children are healthy. More specific. I'm grateful that my kids are healthy enough to go to school. More specific. I'm grateful that my kids like going to school. More specific. I'm grateful that my kids feel safe in school. More specific. Just keep getting more and more specific, and you will find more gratitude building within you. And the tune that you're able to do this, let me tell you, it'll give you a downbeat. It gives you a bass, a rhythm for how to live your life. About how when new things come your way, you're too grateful. You are deeply in wonder and awe for the gift that you have received in this life. And here's the real hitch to the getup. This will absolutely not change your life, but it'll change your relationships. It'll change how you interact with other people. Guaranteed. The moment that you feel comfortable, when you're like, I'm getting pretty specific with my gifts, and I'm starting to feel really good about me, because you are a gift from God. You were put here for a purpose. And the more that you are aware of the gifts that God has bestowed upon you, and in the old language, the more you count your blessings, and the more filled you are with your sense that God has favor for you, the way to change your life is then turn that outward. Be specifically happy and grateful for the blessings in other people's lives. I'm so glad that church down the way got 15 new members last week. I am so grateful that this competitor, this is not about church, this competitor had a huge earnings day. I am so grateful that other student got a good grade on that paper. I am so grateful. And the more you practice that about your friends, and then you turn that towards people you don't like, or people who drive you crazy, that's some challenge right there. You start seeing your enemies as human beings, as gifts from God themselves. And you know what happens when that happens? You start seeing everybody the way God sees them. And that lasts, my friends. That is a gift that bread in the morning, bread in the noontime, nothing can make that stale. A spirit of gratitude, not just for yourself, but for other people, can satisfy the hungry soul. Whew. I stand here partially with this sense for just me, and maybe you need a little bit of this, what I'm about to say. For me, I chose what I wore today specifically. I got a lot of these. I got a couple of these. If you were ever in my office, if you're my confirmation students, you've had a couple of these on. I've got a few. This one that I'm wearing today, this was my first one given to the white part. It's called an alb. Everybody say alb. Alb. Now you're all in my confirmation class. Ha-ha. It's an alb. This one was given to me by my mentor while I was still in graduate school. As you can see, it doesn't really fit. You want to know why? Because it was his. My mentor. I had a long relationship with that guy. No, I didn't know who he was. They assigned him to me. His name's Chip Nielsen. So, let me tell you, I didn't pick my mentor. The conference picked my mentor for me, and I tell you, they couldn't have done a better job. Chip Nielsen has another foot on me and another 60 pounds. He's got this giant beard, and in my first 3 meetings with him, they were an hour apiece. I think I said 10 words. I'm like, I could grow up and be this guy. I'm walking into this position as a pastor, I'm following in this footsteps, and it's easy enough, and I've seen so many of my colleagues who stand solely on their gifts and graces given to them by God. And I walk in, and for me, it was spirit moved. I am walking not into my own robe that is fitted for me, perfectly clean. I got one that I had to put through the dry cleaner several times just to get the smell out. He smelled like Axe body spray. And I still can't get some of his coffee stains out. Because the role of pastor wasn't mine to carve. It's not like it's coming to me as a fresh block. It's a job I'm walking into. This Bible, oh gosh. This is not my law. This Bible was forgotten by the pastor of my first church. I walked in, I got my first church in Minnesota, and I walk into the office, and there was, us pastors are terrible. We leave our offices, and there's books still on the, we'll let the next pastor figure that one out. And this was on there. It's a Wesley Study Bible. I can't tell you how many Bibles I have. I have a ton of Bibles. But here's this one study Bible left for me. She probably just forgot it. But I've been using it ever since. Why? Because the Bible isn't just my document to preach from. It's not just the thing that shaped my life. It has shaped so many others. I come and I have pastored Spirit of Hope now for 2 years. If I think about the history of this congregation, its predecessor understandings of who it was, how it's been, Golden Valley United Methodist Church, before that, all part of this Methodism. We didn't just appear, but we come in this long line that we didn't earn. We're grafted into this story. And that's my other side. I would Be as specific as you can with what you are grateful for. About your own blessings. Turn your gratitude to other people's lives. Try and be as specific and caring for other people as you are for yourself. And then remember that your story didn't start with you. That you walk on the shoulders of giants. You stand on the shoulders of giants. That you are woven into a great story that God has been weaving together from the beginning of all things and will continue on well after you're gone. This, my friends, will help you enjoy the mist. For the brief joys and celebrations, for the meals that are worthy of remembering, for the good memories that should be journaled, the things that are carved into your heart and shape you who you are. This, my friends, is the bread of life, and it is available for you and forever. Amen.